Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I'm breeding a pair of my rabbits and I wanted to bring you all along for the experience. The rabbits I'm breeding today are my Americans. Behind me, my American doe lady. And over there in the corner, my American buck, who you'll see in a minute. If you look back at my FAQ video I did a week or two ago, you'll see all the steps that I take to get to the actual breeding point. These rabbits are 2 weeks apart, but they're both 9 months of age. Their weight is really good, and they have no issue with their general health. So now we're going to take the female to the male's cage for breeding. A few things to think about are possible hazards. I've removed the water bottle so they can't run into it and hurt themselves, or break the bottle. However, I will leave the feeder in. It's more dangerous to expose the cut wires and leave a hole in the cage through which they could escape. Another thing to consider is the possibility of a fight. If a fight occurs, remove the doe immediately, but be careful as you may be scratched or bitten. We put the female into the male's cage because it is full of the buck's pheromones. A buck placed in a doe's cage will often be more interested in smelling around the cage than breeding. Also, unspayed does tend to be territorial of their cages, so a fight is more likely to occur. This is the first breeding for both of these rabbits, so you may see quite a bit of problems caused by inexperience. Oftentimes the buck is so excited he will mount wherever he can. Wait it out or give him a helpful nudge. The doe may play coy and simply run circles around the buck. If she's coy for 5 minutes, remove her and try another day. The act is brief and a successful breeding will result in the male fainting and falling to the side. I wait and observe 3 successful matings, then I remove the female. A female rabbit ovulates 10 to 15 hours after mating. This means that she does not produce the eggs necessary for fertilization until 10 to 15 hours after the first mating. This is called induced ovulation. Because of the long time between mating and ovulation, many breeders choose to do a second breeding around the time of ovulation. The logic behind this practice is that during these long hours, the doe may urinate several times and potentially flush the buck's semen out before ovulation occurs, thus resulting in no or poor fertilization. I've done several breedings without a second breeding, and I've done breedings with both breedings, and I can honestly say I've seen no difference in litter sizes. I will, however, continue to experiment. During the second breeding, you should allow for at least 3 successful matings. This is a good example of inexperience right there. He wanted to mount, he mounted, but it was in the wrong area. He mounted on her side. You can see she's lifting for him and he's trying really hard, but he's not hitting the mark. He's a little high. I'm not going to interfere. I'm going to let him figure this one out for himself. This is a good example of coyness right here, how she was running circles around him. That was a good breeding right there. She accepted him pretty quick. There was a little bit of coyness. But once he mounted, she lifted and let him have it. You see him thumping, he wants more. Thump that back leg pretty hard. After your doe is bred, take her back to your cage. She'll require no special treatment until a few days before kindling. The big question will be, is my rabbit pregnant? The answer to that is actually rather difficult to come by. After 14 days, you can palpitate the doe by holding her on a table and sliding your hand under her abdomen and feeling along the sides of her flanks for several marble-sized lumps. This is much easier said than done and requires considerable practice and experience. Another pregnancy test that I often see recommended is the 14-day test breeding. The logic behind this is that a pregnant doe introduced to a buck will reject the buck due to her pregnancy. This tends to be false. A pregnant doe can and may accept a buck. I don't recommend test breedings because it can be extremely dangerous to the doe and the unborn litter. A doe has 2 uterine horns, meaning a doe may become pregnant in one from the first mating and become pregnant in the second as a result of the test breeding. This would mean that the doe is carrying 2 different litters at the same time. This is dangerous for the litters because when she kindles, she will likely birth both litters at the same time, resulting in half-developed fetuses being born. If a double pregnancy occurs, the rabbit will experience 2 different levels of hormonal stimulation, which can affect the ability of either or both litters to mature properly. If she manages to deliver the first litter, but not the second, her hormones will change to initiate lactation. This results in low hormone levels for the second litter, increasing the likelihood of the second litter dying inside the womb. If they die, the unbalanced hormones may not signal the body to abort the pregnancy. If the doe's body does not absorb the fetuses or only absorb parts, they may end up becoming mummified inside the womb through a process called calcification. Should this occur, the horn of the uterus will become sterile and may be a vector for uterine infections in the future. I don't often palpitate, and I never test breed. The indicator for me is behavior. 28 days after breeding, I give the doe a nest box full of hay. A pregnant doe will often get to work building a nest right away. Sometimes she may simply sit and munch on the hay. But when she starts acting territorial, moving hay around by the mouthful, and pulling fur, I know that she's almost ready. Hopefully, I have a pregnant rabbit. If not, oh well. I am going to count 28 days out, and I will prepare the nest box and have an update when the next box goes in on day 28. And then I will report on kindling if she kindles or not. Hope you guys found this information informative and useful. And as always, have a good one. I need a photo of rabbit naughty bits. I'm totally recording this right now. We's gonna make a rabbit prono.